Welcome, Matt Wheeler. We've got the April series going. I can't believe we're already in mid-April. It's
Oh,
crazy. It's flying by already. I was talking to somebody and I was like, "Oh, I haven't seen you this year." And I'm like, "And that's a long time already. It isn't like a few weeks." So, but anyway, so it's we were just talking about spring. So do you have spring socks today?
no.
Oh, so much for planning. Okay, next time. So
You can see my socks right now, though, if you want.
yes, I would like to. Yes.
Okay,
So
so
this is for the shoeless therapist,
yeah,
otherwise known as the
you
sock
can
full
check me out on
therapist. Yeah.
Instagram, the
There you
shoeless
go.
therapist.
Hmm.
I know. I need to change it to the sock full therapist.
Yes, you can do both. You could do
Yeah. So this
slash.
one, it,
Oh, that's cute.
it's a bike rider, right?
Yeah, very
And
appropriate.
you can see the cyclist. There's
Looks
another
just
little
like you.
cyclist right there. I know, right? Just like me. And
Sunburned.
with the mountains and like
Hmm.
if you go around the back, there's like a little farmhouse on the
Oh,
back.
yeah,
Yeah.
that doesn't look like Arizona, sorry. But
Nope. And then on the bottom, it's kind of fun and creative, and it says, "This is how I roll.
oh, and that is so true of you. Yes, that is
This is how I
actually,
roll."
yeah.
So yeah, I
Well,
thought
that
we'd
those are
share
fun ones. And if
my
you
fun
get really
cycling.
sunburned, which I don't, think you should, but then you would be orange like
Yeah.
that.
No, the cyclist is orange, right?
Hmm.
It's a Oompa
Oh,
Loompa.
yeah, or you could use the fake tan that makes you orange too. So
Right. I could
there you go.
be an Oompa Loompa. That would be
There you
great.
go. You don't look like one, but okay. So what you got for us today as far as the topic goes?
Yeah. So I wanted to explore.
Hmm.
I often hear the word betrayer or
Hmm.
betrayed
Hmm.
used a lot
Hmm.
in the course of recovery work, which
hmm
it's a very simple word that sums up a very normal feeling. But I want to dive a little bit deeper into it because, and I'm totally going to steal um, Troy Love's work here. Um,
We're going to do it with by honoring him. So it's not stealing. We're going to honor Troy by sharing his information. How's
Yeah.
that?
And I've changed it slightly, and
Okay.
I don't even know that I've asked his permission. So
Well, I'm going to
let
text him right now. So
you should. I'll tell everybody what I've changed. In
okay.
his book Finding Peace, he actually puts this diagram, and I
Oh,
think
let me make sure you can share your screen.
it says sharing is not turned on.
I'm working on it. So make co-host. Okay. Now you should.
Uh, um, and I guess before we even start, I wanted to tell everybody last time we did this, um, we didn't we had questions coming in at the end that we couldn't even fully answer. And so if you've got questions, shoot them out there right away so that we can get to everybody early enough. But
Yes.
so here, let's see here if this is popping up. Okay, slideshow. There we go. So if you notice, creating resonance in a relationship is what I'm talking about here. You have wounds, and those corresponding wounds are coming from a place of need or a deficit where a need was present. And usually the wounds that we gain in our adult experiences are going to come from the deficits that we were carrying in our youth. And so I might experience something with a friend, and it might feel like a betrayal to me because my sensitivity to betrayal is going to be there from my childhood. But what I've found is in this work, we often talk about the betrayed and the betrayer. And what I've found is that people will use that phrase just to maintain a common language, but they actually don't always feel it. In fact, they might say, when I found out about your behavior, I felt abandoned. or when I found out about your behavior, I felt loss or rejection or neglect or abuse, right? Like it really depends on what our sensitivity to the wounds were prior to even turning 18. And that most of us then meet our partners later and marry our partners. And then when injuries happen, which are normal, every relationship has injuries, then we associate those to a wound, often thinking that our partner would understand that that's the wound that got hit. And it really isn't. I think it's quite diverse. I have seen every single wound get hit in, let's say, the disclosure process of sharing and finding out about um, the unhealthy behavior that was going on in the relationship, or the breaking of the relational agreement. And unfortunately, in our work, we just use the word betrayal very strongly. And I'll spend time digging down and trying to really understand, like, hey, I know you're using the word betrayal, and if that's really the biggest wound here for you, that's fine. But if we can teach the partner, not only teach the partner how to show up for you, but also teach you to discover what your underlying needs are so that somebody can show up for you, we're going to need to really understand what that need is underneath. And so often I'll even encourage, like, let's stop using betrayal if what you're actually feeling is abandonment. And so Troy went in and did his amazing work and, linked up. Okay, here's your 6 attachment wounds, here's your corresponding needs. And I've made a few tweaks, like in his, I think I went in and added life will be okay even after the loss, in reassurance, assuming that the reassurance isn't coming from an anxious attachment place. So like I'll try and explain that quickly, but like I've had an anxious attachment at various times in my life, and I will often ask for reassurance from somebody because I'm struggling to reassure myself. And so I'm looking for somebody else to fill that void so that I feel better. But the problem is, I can ask for somebody to reassure me over and over. And if I can't reassure myself, then I'll never feel that need get met, despite how many times somebody else tries to reassure me. And so the need for reassurance might actually be just as important or more so to come from within myself than from somebody else. And that would apply to pretty much every single one of these. Troy links the abandonment wound to the need for presence, and that's somebody learning to stay in a space with us despite um, how much hurt and pain or discomfort it may cause them, even if they're the ones that caused the original wound of abandonment to get inflamed. Um, Rejection would be acceptance. And I think I added belonging, which I can't remember. You look at Troy's stuff. If it's different, that's what I've changed. And I've really only changed these words for various reasons. But I can't, but again, Troy's amazing, and this is where I'm stealing this from. So betrayal is a need for trust and honesty. Neglect. This is the one I think I changed the most. He had attention, but we have this weird thing in our culture where we say things like, "You just want attention," and as if there's something wrong with attention. Because the truth is that that may actually be the overwhelming need. And somebody might have or want the need, instead of attention, we have to look at attunement, or to be tended to, or engagement. And then if somebody feels abuse, what they're actually longing for, and this can be a little bit of a mix. I don't have it totally in there, but they want comfort, safety, and stability. But abuse also is often an imbalance of power. And so in order to heal from abuse, we might need our partner to balance the power in our relationship, or I need to balance the power in the relationship, right? I'm not going to put it on the partner as if that's their responsibility. There needs to be work done in our relationship so where there is a balancing of power. And if we don't balance power, we're not going to have comfort, safety, and stability. And I think I've talked a bit about that lately. We can dive into that more for sure. But that balancing of power is that we both are equals in the relationship, that neither one of us carries a power imbalance that puts the other person in a place of abuse or at, again, this, you got to be careful here, but at risk for abuse. And so some couples, for instance, I'll have one person who will be like, yeah, I do all the finances. And if you both are okay with that, and there's like a relational agreement where that works for both of you, that's fine. But the question is it, well, I'm not going to share with you any of the passwords, and you're not going to be aware of like what accounts financially we have out there, and you just get an allowance or a stipend as my partner or my spouse. Like, I get nervous in situations like that. Now there are times where I've seen that occur because there is um there might be somebody takes control of the finances and spends inappropriately and creates an unhealthy financial situation, whether taking out credit without the other person knowing and charging up credit and putting both people in debt, right? And so then another person might correct and say, fine, you're not going to have any access whatsoever, right? So I understand why these imbalances might occur. We just need to be careful with them and recognize that we tend not to heal the wound and meet the need without correcting those power imbalances. Now, um, so I guess one of the reasons I want to throw this out here is as you guys are in your journey of figuring out, right? Like, oh, I'm the betrayed partner. That's fine. You're going to use that term. That's fine. It's like using the term I'm the addict, right? Like if you're comfortable using that term, use that term. But ultimately try to go below and figure out what your deficits are. And because as we communicate with each other as couples, it sure does help to say, I can feel my abandonment wound is coming up and I'm realizing I need your presence. Now, as a partner, I might hear that and say, oh, okay, I'm glad that you need my presence. You're going to need to teach me how, because here's what me showing up and being present looks like. And it also might be me owning, man, I'm realizing more and more I don't know how to be present. And so I'm going to stop sharing. It might be, I don't know how to be present and I'm still learning. I hope you can be patient with me as I figure out how to be present. So, but as couples, as we start to dial in more to what our specific wounds are and what our needs are, it really can get us to a place where we can show up for each other much better. So, Tammy.
I've got no, it's been just on the presence one. I was talking to somebody who's in good recovery, like he's in really good recovery, and he was sharing his journey. But he said, I was, he worked with a lot of travel, and he said he would come home and he would isolate rather than being present for his kiddos and his spouse. And so, and the regret, like I was like, that's how you know you're really in recovery is you recognize that. I mean, you can't go back and do it. He made his amends and did all his work around that, but he's like, like the addiction stole his ability to show up
Oh,
for them. And so like the presence is like, it's like while we're watching TV together, what more do you need? I mean, like we have to learn how to show up, in a real and meaningful way. And you were talking about the betrayal, like, and yes, I think part of it is, like we have to have words that identify, who's which, like so we can have a conversation. But I was thinking like, if it's honesty and trust, and I just found out that, everything I thought was true, it wasn't, so yes, I have a massive rejection wound and abandonment wound, and those are there. And I'm sure those would get pinged, but in the moment, wouldn't the betrayal wound kind of override the other ones? Does that make sense?
It the hard part about it is, I'm gonna say honestly, no. It
Oh,
only over, like, I don't even know how to say it. Like, I'll give you an example. I remember working on one case, and I'll make sure to change enough of the details, but like where the spouse was more hurt that instead of choosing, I got to figure out how to explain this, but like instead of choosing to accept them as their sexual partner, that they would go share that energy with somebody else when they were and still are longing for it. And so for them, it was way more of a rejection wound.
oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've found fascinating is that when you really tune in, you start to understand what the longing and the need was. Like in this particular case, the partner was like, "Yeah, I didn't like that they went and acted out with these other people, but I'm just mad that like I was there wanting to connect." And it was like in their brain, it wasn't even this betrayal. It was, I was here offering and you're not choosing me. And that
Hmm.
when they were doing their recovery work, the person trying to make amends still wasn't giving their energy to make amends, like in the way that this person wanted. And so they're like, they had a fantasy in their head of what kind of energy that they had when they were sleeping or being sexual with other people. And so it's fascinating because again, it might feel like I'm talking about like I'm splitting hairs, but I'm really not. Like when you dig into it, sometimes we use the word betrayal to describe what it would feel like for us instead of realizing like the underlying need was, yeah, I'm irritated that you had sex with other people, but like that's not even nearly my biggest issue. It's that you rejected my offering. And like throughout all these years, you've never wanted to engage with me. And the story I tell myself, the fantasy I have, is that you went and were like all sorts of energy sexual with these other people, even if that wasn't the case. So it's like that's where those wounds really become, you really start to understand what the underlying need is for the people, for the person.
Well, and we both know and love Troy, and I've done his work personally,
Right.
and so yeah, like I don't know anybody who has just one wound. It's always,
Oh,
it's a, it's
totally.
like this is my biggie, and then this is my middle E, and this is my little E. So
Right. And absolutely. And that's the tough part. I'm fine if somebody in doing their work says, "Wow, I realize my biggest wound is betrayal." And I'm like, "That's great because now we are figuring out what the major repair work needs to be." Um but that's where I try to caution and say, "Let's slow down." We use words like betrayed, but is that even the biggest issue? And again, it's whatever words we want to use. I'm just saying let's focus on trying to understand the underlying needs because that's going to help us all find the healing faster anyway.
so then the other one you were talking about, that I wanted to ask about was, uh, the neglect and intention. And I was like, yes, we can, oh, you're just seeking attention. And you can do things, like the negative attention is still attention. And so I love that you actually expanded that of like, the attunement, so to me that would be, I want, it's connection. It's not just, you know, not just, I'm seeing you.
Oh, totally. It's and that's that's what's beautiful. I don't like that our culture has developed this, oh, you're just wanting attention. And really, if you look at it, let's say somebody is just wanting attention, then the question is, what need are they not getting met by that attention? Right? So even if it is negative attention, it's like, oh, but what's going on? What are they really needing? They're needing to be seen, they're needing to be understood, they're needing to be loved in that attention. And so it's really important that we slow down and start to nuance that for them.
And then the one more, and then we'll get to the questions. But so, and I see we have one, but more would be good. When you're talking about the financial, like you're talking about imbalances, but
Yeah,
like you brought up finances, and that's always gut wrenching for me because what I hear, and it's the population I'm talking to. This isn't true in all of society, but if the person, I often hear from partners, who've experienced, I don't even know what to say now. I'm going to say betrayal because I don't know what else to say. But have and when you start asking them about things, they're like, I don't have control of any money. Like they can't pay for resources for themselves because
right,
all of that, and for lots of reasons, sometimes it's control, sometimes it's, because yes, nefarious things are happening, with
right.
the checkbook. But
Yep, for
yeah,
whatever reason,
yeah,
bad things are happening.
but and I was thinking, and yes, for some, it can swing to, then I'm going to have all control, but
Right,
I was thinking, it's like if it's out of balance, really in either way, that doesn't bring health to the relation. Even if you go, yeah, I'm better with money than you are, but even if we're doing the check-in and going, look, let's review things together or whatever, so that there is, more balance in all aspects of that, especially if there's, an issue with that, which honestly, I bet you do too, but I hear that, far too often.
yeah, that imbalance of power, I mean, it can cause such damage in the relationship. And regardless of why it's occurring, like if we're going to have a healthy relationship that is restored, and sometimes we don't want them restored. We want a new relationship that actually works for us because it's never been in a place of healthy
Right.
balance. And so it's one of the more intriguing things to me that I've been studying for the last few years is understanding power imbalances, how they show up in our culture, how they show up in relationships, how they can actually be healthy. A power imbalance in certain situations can be really healthy. Your therapist should have a power imbalance with you. Like if
Correct.
your doctor should have a power imbalance. That's where an unhealthy power imbalance might occur if your therapist is somehow your friend, right? As much as I love the show Shrinking on Apple TV, those therapists should not be hanging out with their clients or whatever, right? Like, or if a therapist doesn't realize the use of the amount of power that they hold, that can be dangerous. And so understanding the power dynamics, there are times where we have to understand and accept that those exist. One of the areas where they can be particularly dangerous is in a peer-to-peer relationship where, as a husband and wife, or a partner and partner, however you want to put it, right? That power imbalance can be extremely volatile and cause a lot of damage that then feels like abuse because of a misunderstanding or control or whatever is happening. So slowly figuring out and like deconstructing, like, why does this exist in our relationship? It's going to take time. And when you hear about a woman or a partner who feels like I can't even, buy things for myself or whatever else, I mean, that to me is frightening of a terrible, potentially and most likely abusive power imbalance, because then it's, I'm going to keep you in this relationship, and because I'm afraid to lose you, but I'm going to do it through potentially an abusive power. That is not okay, because then we
Yeah.
we we lose the basic principle of consent. Like, I can't even consent to be in this relationship because I'm feeling forced because of the power imbalance.
And they do feel trapped, and and I was like, I don't want to be in a relationship
Mhm.
where I'm trapped or I'm trapping somebody, I'm keeping them, like like that's not a relationship. That's, I mean, I don't even know, but like,
Right.
that's, I'm always sad when I
Oh,
hear those things,
that's not a
because
relationship.
you give them low cost, resources, and they're like, I can't, I can't get the money for that. That's why we've got lots of free things too, because we want people to be able to get help. So thanks for
Oh,
being here. So
for sure. But the interesting thing is I'll hear words in the recovery world and in therapy, words that have begun to grate on me.
mm,
And it's words like unsafe. I feel unsafe. The reason that grates on me is there's so much underneath the word unsafe that if anybody says to me I feel unsafe, I'm like, okay, good. You opened the door to let me into what you're experiencing, but now you have to teach me what that actually means to you. And so then I'm like, let's slow down and figure out what feels unsafe. Well, I feel insecure. I feel threatened. I feel like I'm currently being harmed, right? Like whatever it is, it's like, okay, let's slow down and figure out what's underneath unsafe. Well, the word abuse is another one of those words, right? Like you're abusive. And it's like, okay, hold on, let's figure this out. Is there a power imbalance that I'm manipulating? Am I using it to get gain for myself at your expense? Okay, let's explore what that is. I believe there's plenty of people who are unsafe in their relationship. You're not wrong. And that word very much defines it, just like you are feeling abused in the relationship. But if we can't get in and figure out what the abuse looks like, where it's coming from, oftentimes a partner in recovery, right? The individual who's been struggling with addiction will often roll their eyes. Oh, of course, I'm abusive. They don't even understand what you're saying, right? Because they don't know, they don't even understand the power dynamic and how they've been using it. Now, does that mean it makes it okay? Of course not. There is no amount of abuse that is ever okay. There is no amount of rejection or betrayal or whatever that's okay. But we do have to go in and figure out what is the imbalance of power so that we can figure out how to change the abusive cycle or the abuse pattern that's occurring. It's
well, and
messy.
go, yeah, it's always messy. All of this is messy, and that's why we want to have good resources for people. As you're, if something is unsafe, if I perceive that someone is unsafe for me, to me, that is me going, I need to do something. I need to do something. Now, if it's a close relationship and something's literally feeling unsafe, then, and I value the relationship enough to lean in and work on, voicing my concerns, that's one thing. But there are some people that I just go, yeah, I am going to choose to step away and take care of myself. So, and I hear this all the time. One of my words is trigger, because like they triggered me. And I'm like, if I am triggered, I have an opportunity. There's something going on with me. It's not necessarily what they're doing. It may be, but what they're doing, like you were using the example earlier, it's like I have a massive rejection wound. If somebody does something and I perceive they've rejected me, I'm going to be triggered,
Oh,
and they
totally.
may not have been doing anything. They may have no clue that anything happened. In
Right.
fact, I think that's the case. So part of it is, internalizing the empowerment,
Right.
of like, okay, so life is going to happen, all of these people, and especially in a chaotic, these tools pertain to any relationship, really. But if you're in a primary relationship that has been impacted by infidelity, sex addiction, porn addiction, etc., then there's more messiness. And so
Mhm.
identifying what can I do in this moment, if I'm identifying something, so that I can move forward, rather than being stuck.
Yeah, and one of the things that it's fun when I'm talking to like even Troy or anybody who's done a decent amount of their work, but it's fun how often Troy's like, "Hey, just so you know, my rejection wound is getting stirred up." And if you notice, even that phrase is I'm owning that it's my wound. I'm not telling you that you're meaning to or not, but I might ask, are you intending to? Right? Are you intending to hit my rejection wound right now? Right? But when you start slowing down and understanding the wounds and taking ownership, and ownership's a weird way of explaining it because it's not like when I was growing up, I was like, oh, like I'm choosing the rejection wound right
Yeah.
now, right?
No,
But
not at all.
but I still have to own that my life experiences were internalized by me as a kid, and I mean, I did the best I knew how, and yet I internalized these wounds, and other people hit those wounds for me, whether they mean to or not. Now, the gracious assumption, and I would say that probably the majority of people aren't intending to hurt us. But that's the gracious assumption. Even our spouse, the person who's closest to us, especially, is probably not intending to, which I will go into the second question. I could
Oh,
go straight in and talk about it.
well, I'll read it out loud. So, what is your opinion on betrayal that seems especially egregious and insidious? Like the fact my husband with offending behavior knew I had been molested as a child by my father and had the rug pulled out from under me constantly in my life. And he would always preach about how he's given me a solid rug finally, how holding me while I cried about my dad childhood. I understand addiction, but I continuously come up against parts where I feel there's more to this than addiction. So, and we
Yeah.
will get to the first question, I promise.
Oh
So,
yeah, no,
but
totally. So it's interesting because as I was explaining this, like the reality of it is when you talk about there's more to this than addiction, there always could be more, right? Like uh I always struggle because, like, for instance, I feel like the term narcissist gets thrown out way too frequently. But technically, like if you have somebody who is narcissistic, then they might be operating from a shame place within them that, from the research we currently have, can be managed but not necessarily healed. And so you might have somebody who, anytime their shame gets hit, becomes egregious and insidious as a way of self-protection, which might be where could come from a narcissism. Or let's just say you have somebody who is just so hurt and wounded themselves, they're looking to uh, become, or like, I'm trying to think of the right words here. They intentionally try and hurt other people, that sort of thing. And so when you talk about more to this than addiction, when I look at it, I would say there's more to everybody's case than addiction, right? There's all of these attachment wounds and hurts and issues that we bring into the relationship. Now, I have zero idea about the individual who wrote this, although you did share some very vulnerable things. Um, the, the idea that you were vulnerable enough and able to share with, I think you said him in this situation, that you were able to share with him that you were molested as a child, and that you had been molested by your father, and that you were able to share those things with him. Um, he may not have made a connection to his behavior, and because he's like, I'm not a child molester, I'm not hurting you in that way, and not understood the connection of any sort of deceit that or behavior that is deviant sexually might totally play into that wound for you. For all we know, he's sitting there talking about creating a rug for you, as you put it, a solid rug finally, and he's doing that by financially, because maybe your father couldn't do that, or doing that in showing up religiously in your life. I mean, I don't know. There's so many possibilities. And so the hard part is, and that's something you're probably going to need to explore with him, is how, like, what did he mean by he's providing a solid rug? And what was he aware of the contradictions that were going on for you in knowing that he's doing these deceitful behaviors. I'm assuming it's deceitful because I'm assuming here that you had some sort of a disclosure.
Well, yeah, and I'm going to use she uses offending behavior. So offending behaviors, I mean, there could, because
Oh,
molesting would
yeah.
be illegally, like,
Oh,
would
yeah.
be rape.
There
So if
totally
your
could be.
husband is also raping, or underage, sex, etc.,
Sure.
that's a whole different thing. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah.
in that case, you may have had somebody who intentionally took your hurt to try and pretend and hide from their own behavior. That is very much a possibility. And what is my opinion on it? It's horrible, right? My opinion on it is that behavior is terrible. The question that I would try and help a client figure out is what what can you heal from, meaning whether you stay in the relationship or not, right? I would need to figure out for myself, with if you have certain behavior that's especially egregious or insidious, like, was that intentional? Was it coincidental? And for myself, I have to figure out, can I stay in a relationship where that was the case? That is a terrible and difficult place for a person to be. And
So she did add he was living a double life and knew it. Like, yes, and no offense, but every addict is, and it's very compartmentalized. So knew the betrayal could literally kill me at any point. So what I hear is fragility, for you emotionally, and I hope that does not mean suicide. Please
right,
make sure that you're getting the help that you need. He plotted getting me to marry him, which came out during marriage therapy after discovery. If he was dissociating, but he raped me coercively, it's wild, but he doesn't have like barely any trauma in his life. And we get clients that come to our residential treatment program that don't think they have, trauma, abuse, neglect, grief, loss, all of those things, abandonment. And then they start doing the deeper work.
and
And
I
guess
will,
what comes out?
and I'm not going to blame any of his behavior on
I'm
trauma.
not I'm
Yeah,
not
yeah.
giving him a pass at all.
Yeah,
No,
no,
this
I
is, so yeah,
I like
please.
how you and I
Yeah,
both were like,
yeah,
ha ha ha. No,
yeah,
right.
no.
Now, here's what's interesting. Maybe he doesn't have any trauma from his life. However, I'll tell you one of the more interesting pieces I've discovered over the years is that neglect is the hardest trauma to find, because we look and go, oh no, my life was normal, my life was fine, I just didn't have anyone around, I had to figure out things on my own. And so a lot of times I find when people tell me they don't have any trauma, I often find that lurking in there is neglect. But again,
Neglect the
neglect,
silent
the silent abuser, is
abuser
that gray, is
by
that?
Dr. Enid Gray,
Yeah.
Enod Gray, Gray. The book is on our website. She did a podcast with Dr. Rob. Like, this one hit me because yes, I would say, oh, my childhood was lovely, and then I read this book and went, oh, it's not child protective services stuff. It's like the
Yeah.
the stuff. So
Yeah, no, neglect's an interesting one, but even if he has a bunch of neglect, right, really he has to dive in and figure out, even if he has no trauma, he has to dive in and figure out, why did he go that way? Why did he take those avenues? If he plotted at getting you to marry him, like, what is that about? Like, where did he have to learn to be conniving and deceiving in order to get to ultimately violate trust? Like, yeah, it's terrible. The living a double life, Tammy said it, every single one of them is, and they know it. But it's about, why did they have to learn to live that double life?
yeah,
And what was that about? But it's you're in a tough space. And I think it's beautiful that you're trying to figure it out. And so that's one of the things you're doing is, can I have a gracious space to understand him and his wounding? And do I have room to heal and to let him find healing? And really, it comes back to, over time, can he create a secure base for the two of you to grow and develop. And I will tell you, as a victim of childhood sexual abuse myself, like, there's so many layers to healing from that. I'm amazed at how much work I've had to do and continue to do myself, and the different types of therapy over time that I've had to do in order to find the different pieces that need healed. And it's and so that's such a tough journey, and especially to have it be your father. So not only do you have the abuse of sexual abuse by itself, and then you have the position of power and authority that your father was in. Oh my gosh, such a horrible place for you to have to heal from. And I imagine that's creating layers to your healing with your spouse that are just tremendous.
Well, and you mentioned marriage therapy, but you didn't mention help for you. And I put the Empowered Women's Retreat. That is amazing and healing. And there's the deeper work. And guess what we don't talk about is him. It's, it's all about healing, for you. So I would really encourage you to take that. I mean, it's a, I talk about lifelines here. It's like we're throwing you lifelines, and I love that Matt said this is a difficult place to heal from, but you can heal
Oh
from,
yeah.
so, like we've heard, I mean, I have heard you too, so many things, and people can heal from those things, that does not have to, to stay horrible. So we're going to go to the first question because I don't want to miss it. Okay, betrayed partner, 15 months past initial discovery. We recently had disclosure. My husband seems to be in good recovery, and I'm also seeing a CSAT for complex post-traumatic stress disorder. I am wondering how people can learn to live with the knowledge of the things their partner did while they were acting out. Intellectually, I understand it has nothing to do with me, but intrusive thoughts and triggers are awful. Empowered Women's Retreat, I mean, they work specifically on that, but
Yeah.
please.
No, this hits a sensitivity that I've had around disclosure, and I'm not discouraging it. I am more just wanting to educate, especially in doing couples work over time, and also doing a lot of sexual healing work. Um, as I've been studying and working with sexual health and uh, disclosures, I have a different view at this point because they can create so much knowledge, like you say, and create imagery, especially people who have a really powerful creative mind. They often are the type that can actually create the imagery of all the terrible things that they've seen and that they've heard. They now create imagery to accompany it. And so here's the hard part. You're not asking how to prevent it because it's already occurred. But that is one thing I work with to try and make sure that a partner knows that it can create a lot of really terrible imagery that might make a healthy sexual relationship more difficult to navigate when you are reintegrating healthy sexuality into your relationship, which I highly encourage because it's very healing for both of you. But I will tell you one book that I love that might feel a little more abstract, but the concepts are all there. It's called um, Overcoming Intrusive, oh gosh, all of a sudden I can't even think of it. Overcoming Intrusive Thoughts by Winston. I think it's Wendy Winston. Now I gotta go look it up.
I'm looking it up. Overcoming and
Obsessive and intrusive thoughts. That's what it is. And it's going to probably sound like a little more OCD-ish, but what I've learned is that when we get those things stuck in our head, it is a bit of OCD-ish. Like, and so you might even find a therapist who works with OCD specifically, and just tell them, I may have OCD, I may not, but I do have these obsessive and intrusive thoughts. I do think that book is a wonderful introduction into learning how to let those thoughts move through you instead of getting caught in them. A lot of times it's about learning to be present, but sometimes your biggest barrier is actually coming to confront the discomfort that he did those things or she did those things. Um, and so you actually you have to confront the discomfort that those things occurred and learn to reconcile the discomfort that all of that is real. And learning to come to terms with that is how you can ultimately let go of that. And a lot of OCD work is sitting with the discomfort of whatever it is the obsessive or intrusive thoughts are trying to resolve. So much of it is that I'm uncomfortable. So, and again, I'm not trained in OCD. I have enough knowledge to be dangerous. I should actually say I have enough knowledge of when to refer.
There you
One
go.
one day, I actually I have a kid of mine who wants to specialize in OCD as a therapist, and I told that kid, I go, hey, when you're either in your grad program or you're a therapist, I go, I'll do the training with you. Not
There
because
you
it's
go.
yeah, not because it's where I want to specialize per se, but it is one of the trainings I'd like to do. But one of the interesting things about obsessive and intrusive thoughts is it's usually our inability to be in discomfort. So I'll use a basic example. And if any of you, my OCD therapist friends are listening, chime in and tell me if I'm doing this wrong. But um, for instance, if I'm afraid, I'll use a very basic, stereotypical OCD thought. If I'm afraid of getting sick, I might wash my hands regularly because I'm trying to protect myself from germs, and I might wash them excessively because it makes me feel better to go through the ritual rather than sitting with the discomfort of I suddenly thought of a story. I think it's okay that I share it. I'll tell you in a second. But
Okay.
um, then sitting with the discomfort of, hey, the truth is I might get sick, right? The truth is I'm going to get sick sometimes, and I need to be okay with the discomfort. Nothing wrong with washing my hands, but I need to be okay with the discomfort that I might get, that I'm going to get sick at various times. And it might because of not hand washing, or it might be just because I socialize with friends and we pass germs through the air. Or I might eat food that makes me ill, right? And so I have to learn to get comfortable with the discomfort of whatever it is that thing is. Now, I will say, not being trained in this, I do have the kid who wants to be an OCD therapist, had OCD or some levels of OCD. There were more because of the Tourette's, which I think I've talked about on here before. And so they're what's referred to as Tourettic OCD. And so there were times where we would do things, and let's say he would drop a piece of candy on the floor. Um, and he'd be like, oh my gosh, I can't eat that. Now, in general, I would say just throw it away. But because I knew he was so afraid, I would say, eat it, and I go, you don't have to, but eat it. Learn to face the fear and be okay with the discomfort that you could get sick. And so much of that will help a person start to get rid of those intrusive thoughts. Now, again, I'm not going to diagnose you here because honestly, I have no idea what's going on. And this is what's super common. Sometimes we've got to sit in that discomfort, but I do think that book can really help give you a lot of ideas. I've found it incredibly beneficial. So that's a really long answer.
Yeah. Well, and Debbie McCrae has lots of pointers to even just to disrupt. And one of hers is stop it, stop it, stop it. And I had something, and it wasn't a betrayal. I don't remember what it was, but I was like hyper focused on this loopy thing, and I was like, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it. And then I can't even remember what it was now. And that was a couple weeks ago. But I was like, sometimes just interrupting the cycle, so that you can go, oh, let me think about this in my executive brain. Like you say he's doing good work,
And
it seems to be in good recovery. So these things are
another
moving forward. So,
another example like that I've noticed is that sometimes it might be during sex that somebody has these
mm,
intrusive thoughts, and sometimes it's stopping and going, okay, hold on, pause. And
mm,
like basically I have the power to pause this. I don't have to just force myself through the intrusive thoughts. I can stop and say, hey, can you just look me in the eyes for a second? Can you just tell me you love me? Right.
mm,
And it's not basically teaching your part that I need my partner and that's the only way I can overcome it. But sometimes it's becoming present. It's recognizing that I have the power to stop at any time. It's that I can stop this whole scenario at the moment. Like I don't have to keep pushing myself through these thoughts, right? There's a lot of different things. And so I highly recommend keep working at it and see what you can discover, which tools work well for you. And I love that you're bringing it up as a topic.
yeah. And Debbie McCrae, like we talk about that a lot. She'll be on again next week. And we talk often about things to do to regulate in the moment that just give you a stance. And here's the deal. And, I love that you're 15 months in and you're making progress and you're only 15 months in. So he knew all along that he was, compartmentalized and lying and doing all this. You had 15 months and that's it. And so like at some point understand that this is a process, and if you're here and if you're doing the ongoing work, yeah, it will get better. And like we were talking about earlier, I still you know i i I own, like, I hate having a rejection wound, especially a big one. Like I can go to my abandonment wound a lot faster, but my rejection wound, I hate that. And the faster I'm able to own it and go, yeah, I'm feeling rejected right now. Okay, my rejection wound is getting poked, and what am I going to do about it? Like it just starts to shift it. It nothing changed except for like I'm going like, okay, I can choose to do something in this moment, that will be positive for me. And sometimes it's just sitting there and going like, yeah, I, I legitimately was rejected, and and whatever it is. So but you're honestly, you're doing great. You're here, and it won't always be like this. So thanks for showing up for here. And I had put the Empowered Women's Retreat, and the person that started with this, said she is in groups and going to the retreat. Yay, I am thrilled about that. But she did add, well, his mother did have an affair on his father, and to this day, only my husband knows, not his dad or brother. They still want to keep it from him despite everything we're learning through this recovery process.
You
Can
know,
we talk about that level of the family?
it's interesting because as you read that, she had talked about like this idea that, oh, he doesn't have any trauma, or he swears he doesn't have any trauma. And I'm sitting there going, okay, first of all, how did he discover the affair? Right? Because if he was a teenager, and I've seen this, a teenager who walks in or finds out that their parent is having an affair, that in of itself can be traumatic. Or did mom confide in him, but we can't tell anybody else? That can be traumatic. And if you think about just that, I always struggle to use such a harsh term, but let's say mom throughout his life has confided and sought support from the husband, right? That's what we might refer to as emotional incest, because mom's using the son to get her emotional needs met at the expense of the child, right? And so um, you look here and go, what is going on that we have all these secrets in the family and only some of us know and we've got to hold them? Ugh, that makes me super nervous.
Yeah, and she said it's incredibly important to note that his behavior started at a very young age and escalated to offending well before he discovered his mom's affair in his senior year of high school. And that's
Oh,
really telling in
oh,
and
his
of itself.
mom had an affair. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
his mom had, yeah, but it still is. Here's the deal. We talk all the time about addiction, usually starts before age 10, the need to dissociate,
Yeah,
compartmentalize,
there
all of
are
those things. So I'm going like, if all of this started at a very young age, and you just described the family dynamic, that there's all these
Oh
secrets and we can't tell, and it's all
gosh.
like, oh my gosh, what a,
Yeah.
what a dysfunctional family system.
The idea that there isn't trauma there,
Oh, massive.
yeah, I have a hard time, I don't want to tell people what their trauma is, but it's one of those that I'm like, well, that sounds awful. Um, and it sounds
And
like,
kids will go, well, this is normal, this is,
we
my childhood was great. We hear this from guys coming into treatment who have, this kind of stuff going on.
Yes, and to be honest, I have done therapy throughout my life. The state of Arizona forced us into therapy when we were kids. I've done it as an adult, and there were lots of parts of my life where I would be like, no, I mean, my child was good. It was pretty normal. And I'm like, oh, cringe. I can, too many of us think our childhood, oh no, like it wasn't that bad. And it's like, no, no, it really was.
Because you were a kid, and and we decide that we're the problem, and b, this is what we know,
Right.
of course our family is normal. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's way more. I hope, I
There's a,
mean, both of you getting help, and yeah, like that, it's one of those where,
and
him being able to, like, part of the work will be stop the problematic behavior. That's always the top layer, but then address the underlying issues. And there's speaking from experience of, my journey, I mean, decades of work to do. That doesn't mean that he won't, be making, giant gains if he's attentive to doing the work.
Now, I don't know his dynamic, but I will say that as I hear this, there are quite a few in the old school sexual addiction research. And when I say old school, I usually mean the pre-internet age, because the internet age changed the dynamics of sexual addiction to where it was much more common. But in the old school dynamic, the number of um, sex addicts who have a really unhealthy enmeshment with their mother was really high. And so I'm hearing this, like he found out about his mother's affair. His mother, like lots of secrecy in the family. You might, well, I should say he might check out some of Ken Adams' work. He does quite a bit of work around mother
Mother
enmeshment.
enmeshment, silently seduced. There's
Hmm.
podcasts on our podcast with Dr. Rob and Dr. Adams.
Yep.
And then, I mean, we have adult children things. I'm not saying he is or isn't, but, and here's the deal. I'm looking at those parents and going, like, I wonder about the generation above, like, we are in a time when we at least have resources and help, and while there still can be, stigmas about sex addiction, it's gotten so much better. And mental health, and people didn't get help for mental health issues, back in the day, and it was the secrecy that you're explaining of, like, oh, we're gonna look
Yeah.
perfect, to everybody else, and then all of this toxic stuff is going on in the house.
So I'll throw out a quick warning before we
Yeah.
wrap it up. It's
Okay.
very common for a partner to maybe even have this conversation on a webinar and get excited and go to their
Yeah.
partner and try to dictate their recovery. And can I tell you guys, like, I love it if you're like, hey, I heard some really interesting things on this webinar and you should listen. And I talked about our situation. I'm curious on your thoughts. Like, have you, is it possible you had this enmeshment with your mother, right? Like, I don't want to see any of you as partners dictating each other's recovery, but I love the idea that we share with each other curiosities and things that we're learning. So please take this, be curious, open up spots for you guys to have gracious assumptions for each other and opportunities for each other to heal and have empathy and compassion. But just be careful that you don't take this information and beat your partner with it and say, if you're going to recover, you need to do these things. That doesn't work for any of us.
It doesn't. Yeah. I'm doing some work in it, and one of the things, really, so I'm working on becoming a certified coach, because I'm really passionate about this. But one of the things that I navigated to right away was the control and freedom. And I have found that useful. I'm practicing with clients, but I'm finding that really useful because I'm always reminded that we have no control over anyone else. And being in a relationship, we want to be free to choose. And so
Correct.
so that one's been a really interesting tool. And yes, I still, with all the years that I have, if somebody comes and tells me what I should do, my first reaction, and it's a reaction, is, I'm gonna dig my little heels in, and then I have to go, wait. Like I can overcome it, but my first, like, I can physically have the reaction, and I hate it, and at least I don't say anything. And then I go, oh, they're trying to offer something to me that would be useful.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of work. So yes, if you want a good thing, yes, share resources. Like, oh man, I'm hearing so many great things. Dr. Robbins, podcast, Sex, Love, and Addiction, as Dr. Ken Adams, lots. Troy Loves on. I mean, there's lots of great things, on that particular one. I just put the link for all of these webinars. And there, I decided, I was thinking, oh, there's gonna be 500 hours. I was like, no, there's probably thousands of hours of recordings from the years that, we have multiple every week of recordings, including John Taylor, who did a 2-part series on mother enmeshment. Could be interesting. Let's watch it. So there's lots of resources, and you can always email me, tami@seekingintegrity.com. I know some of them I can go, yeah, on 2/7 of 24, we did this one. So it's kind of crazy. But anyway,
You have an amazing memory. There's no doubt.
I've done lots of these, and there's certain ones I did put the should I stay or should I go. That one I share often because that was
Yep.
a 4-part series, and just asking the question. You may go, I'm answering these 10 questions, and oh my gosh, I am,
Yep.
85% in, and I was thinking I was 20. So like, yeah, just having information. That's what we're here for. So okay, I think we are out of time, and let's see. We're going to read this real quick and then we got to go. I brought it up and he says he needs to talk to her if I'm ever going to be comfortable, but I do dictate his recovery in regards to the boundaries that keep him from sex offending, but haven't gotten to the point that I may need to report. Recovery for 8 months was performed and no charges inside, still active threat to others. I'm trying not to dictate, but also be responsible. Thanks for your time with questions today.
Yep.
So yeah, when there's legal offender behavior that makes it, and there are sex offender
It creates a
therapists.
dynamic. It creates
Yeah,
a dynamic that's really tough. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, thanks, Matt.
All
So
right.
Debbie will be here next week and Matt will be back in 2 weeks. So we'll see everybody then. Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye.